Hi, welcome to our lesson on the decisions file structure. Today we're going to be going over what the main folder directories are for decisions, understand how each directory functions within the decision application, and understand where we want to look in order to configure or troubleshoot decisions. So let's get right into it. When you install Decisions, by default, if you don't specify it, Decisions is going to create a file folder called Decisions under your system drive, program files. This is going to house a bunch of different settings for Portal and Studio customization, setting configurations, error logs, and a few other details. But we'll get more into what each one does in a moment. But before we do that, it's important to know that decisions, flows, and designer elements are not stored inside of this file structure. In fact, those are going to be stored in the database. You have decisions deck object files that are stored in the file structure, which get created upon installation. But when you start creating flows, rules, truth tables, pages, forms, and all those other types of designer elements, those are going to get stored in the database under, for example, the entity folder table if you're making folders, entity assignment table for assignments, so on and so forth. So let's get into this file structure. The first thing to note about it is that there are 3 subdirectories. Within the Decisions folder, you have Decisions Server, Decisions File Storage, and InstallBackUp. The Decisions Server is going to house all of your error logs, licensing utilities, your application settings, configurations, modules, and all the sort. File Storage is designed to hold file references as .connected files and .info files, and any sort of flow data that's going to get recorded within your flow, such as inserting a file into a file upload component on a form in your flow. There are a few other things that get stored in here, and we'll discuss that when we get to it. Lastly, we have the InstallBackUp, which has a unique function. It technically stores the keys.dat, but under specific circumstances, which I'll get into. So first, let's get into the Decisions Server folder. The first one I'd like to talk about is the bin folder. This bin folder stores a bunch of third-party libraries that Decisions uses. For example, it stores the nvelocity DLL, which is used for our decisions string builder steps, asPostPDF.dll, which is used for all of our PDF steps, such as convert image to PDF, and of course the decisions framework.dll. Your decisions instance wouldn't run without this. It also contains a decisions version, which can be very handy when trying to query the version very quickly on a decisions environment. Please keep in mind there are way more different DLLs in this bin folder. I just wanted to point out a few of them to show you the wide variety of stuff that this holds. So next we have the license. This license is going to display the machine key for your decisions instance, which is covered in the blue mist right here. You want to be able to contact support at decisions.com if you need a license key. Be sure to provide the machine key that you give. This will allow your Decisions instance to be licensed, which is crucial for it to run and utilize all of the features that come with your Decisions install. We then have logs. It's an entire folder dedicated to Decisions logs. And the types of logs it stores are the Decisions web core logs, which are going to more closely align with the error messages that you see in your environment. The primary SHMCC logs, you have the Decisions web core usage, which shows how often things are getting used. The Decisions web core usage details, which is, as the name suggests, a more detailed description of that Decisions web core usage, going into the individual details of what's being run when. And you can set up separately logged categories as well. A lot of people will set SAML logs for this when they're going to do SSO configuration. However, for this particular example, I've just logged my divide errors into this separate folder. From there, we also have the settings XML. This is extremely important when you're trying to configure decisions. because it's going to hold all of the functionality that you're looking for in your decisions environment to be changed from its default install. So you have the SMTP settings, the SSL configuration if you want to use HTTPS instead of HTTP. You have the base portal URL, which you can configure. You have the database connection string, which is really important to be able to get. You have the log settings are stored in here for how things are getting logged, such as the log max backup size, how many logs you'll store per the decision's web core logs, the max file size, as well as a whole bunch of other features, such as HTTPS redirect, which is a commonly used feature in clustered servers. And I can go on and on discussing this, but that would be outside of the scope of this course. The idea is that there are many configurable settings for your decisions environment to run, and they are stored in this file. We then have the instances folder. This is going to be used for housing multi-tenant environments. So if you have a multi-tenant setup, which I will go into this now and show you what this looks like, you're going to automatically have a control created. I should mention this happens regardless of where you have multi-tenant or not. You will always have a control instance created, which is your primary decisions instance. However, in multi-tenant, you can have multiple tenants that are all reliant on the control instance for their permissions and account distribution. So when you have these multi-tenant instances, they're going to have folders that get created for them in this directory, as well as individual settings that will get stored in there. For example, the progress.txt file that's going to show install progress for each tenant as it's being installed. You have individual error logs that are going to be localized to that tenant folder. You have settings XMLs that are going to be in each tenant for their settings. Many more files reside in these as well. But what you need to know is that whenever you have a multi-tenant environment, any other tenants you create are going to have their settings and configurations and logs stored inside of these tenant folders under instances. The last thing I want to do is talk about modules, because this is where a lot of decisions integration functionality comes from. So if you navigate to C, program files, decisions, decision server, modules, decisions.local, and core service DLLs, you can write your own custom SDK, software development kit, core service DLLs. So you can make your own flows and rules and add them to the decisions environment here. You'll also see here a list of all of the downloaded modules in your decisions environment. Not every module available, but every module that's been downloaded. So for example, in this one here, I have AWS modules downloaded. I have the PowerShell module downloaded. I have the Python module downloaded, as well as many others as you can see in that screenshot. That decisions.local, that is the directory where you're uploading your custom SDKs to, your custom DLLs with your own special rules and flows, or maybe page components and the like. So that's going to do it for the decisions server folder. And I'd now like to move on to the decisions file storage folder. Now you'll see it says decisions file storage primary. And that's because when you go into file storage, there's going to be an immediately nested folder after that called primary. When you click on that, you see the screen that you get here. So let's go into it. First, we have form session. These are just a list of data files to maintain metadata for the forms that are running inside of your decisions environment. You have .data files and a few .back files in there as well. From there on, we have the archive. The archive contains files that are attached to flows that are no longer running and have been most likely moved here via the file storage cleanup job, which comes defaultly created in your decisions instance. You can also clear old data from this file directory to the hard delete scheduled job in decisions, which I will post the documentation regarding how to do in this video's description. You'll see it has a considerable amount of numbers and letters sorted numerically and alphabetically respectively. these numbers and letters are the key to identifying where an archive file is stored. So let's say that my archive files ID is 7.2. I would click on 7, and then when I click on that 7 folder, there will be another folder identical to this inside of it, another layout of numbers and letters. I would then click on 2. When I click on that second number, or character more specifically, I will get taken to the file directory in which my archived file data with that leading ID number of 7.2 is stored. I'll get more into this in a moment and show you a live demonstration, because this schema of file storage will show itself again and again. But taking a step back from that, let's go into styles. So this contains all of the CSS files that you've uploaded, default CSS that comes with decisions, and any less files that also come with decisions. So for example, the little favicon, the little symbol that's next to your Chrome tab or Explorer tab that shows the decisions logo, that can be changed there with the ICO file. You have different less files that are stored in the common, the mobile, the portal, the studio, and then just some that are outside of all of those. And then the CSS folder is going to contain all of the CSS both uploaded by you and included default in decisions. And now, under file storage, we have the primary and settings. This is what I was mentioning earlier, where not all of the files stored here are just info files. There are a few key pieces of information that get stored here that are necessary for particular decisions functions. For example, this holds the database ID.txt, which is needed for any sort of failover server configuration. You have to match the database ID of the failover server to the one created in your main decisions instance so that it can connect to the database properly if something were to happen on your production environment. Secondly, you have the keys.dat, and this is used for upgrading decisions. This contains encryption keys that are necessary for making sure that you can access the old database when you're upgrading majorly from, like, let's say version 7.2 to version 8.19. You would need that keys.dat file as a means of decrypting that database when it's connecting to that encrypted database created in the previous decisions version. And then we have FlowData. This contains the files of long-running flows, such as uploaded files. These might have been uploaded to the flow via a file upload component in a form, and then that file data is then moved throughout the flow and used in various places. Decisions automatically stores that sort of data here. It has the same directory schema as the archive system. So you have the first two characters of the ID of the stored object are going to determine what folder directory it is stored under in the flow data. So I've got a demo right here to go over exactly what this looks like. So you can not just hear me talk about it, but see what's going on. Alright, here we are inside of my decisions environment. What I have here is a simple file upload form, and then right here I have an end form that is going to output the file data ID and display it so that we can find it within our file storage. And I'll show you how to look. So the first thing we want to do is we want to run this flow. I'm going to select a file, just the decisions logo here. All right, I'll hit OK, and then I'll finish. And there is the file ID. It starts with 10F45A79, and I'm not going to read the rest. But if we go into our file storage, here we are. We're going to go into Program Files, Decisions, and then go into File Storage, Primary, and then under FlowData. When you click on this, you'll see there are every single digit number in our base 10 system ordered numerically, followed by every English alphabet character ordered alphabetically. Now remember, our file's ID was 10F45A79 followed by a bunch of other characters. So if I were to input the first two here, one starts it out, I'll click on 1, I'm going to be met with another nested file structure that's going to be similar. My next one was 0, and I'm going to hit 0. And there it is. There's my decisions logo. This is how you search for files within your FlowData that you can later recall in your flow to be able to use them in a variety of sort of ways. So instead of maybe creating another file data based off of that, we can load it from this path and use it elsewhere. This can help improve performance. All right, and we're back. Let's go over the final folder being discussed, the decisions install backup. So what resides in this? Well, nothing. Well, kinda. So it contains the keys.dat files for multi-tenant environments because they can't be contained on an instance by instance basis. So this keys.dat gets stored into the install backup when you're creating a multi-tenant environment, and it would consequently get stored in here. That's all that Decisions stores by default in version 9 and above. So let's back up and go over exactly what the point of this was again. Remember, we wanted to go over the main folder directories, which were the Decision Server folder, the FileStorage folder, and the InstallBackUp folder. We want to make sure that we understand how these function in Decisions within the application itself. So we know that a Decision Server file contains a lot of the logs, a lot of the features that you need for troubleshooting your Decisions instance. The file storage is going to focus primarily on just being able to improve performance by changing how things are accessed, how things are moved around, and understanding the file directories, especially within the data store, is the key. But in addition to that, you also have to keep in mind that your keys.dat files in most installs and your database text IDs are going to be located in there, which are necessary for some Decisions configuration setups. And lastly, the install backup file. It's good to know where it is. It's especially good to know where it is if it's multi-tenant. Thank you all for watching this video. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.